what's happening here is that at some point they're trying to crush this market, and then these legacy incumbent players will come in, they'll get a bigger share.
How would lawmakers be able to govern? I mean, you look at Section 230 of how they kind of govern the internet and a lot of the content creators and social media companies that essentially have been built over the last few decades. Do you see something like that coming out of DC at some point? Something that large and sweeping that would affect crypto and especially the NFT market? What are your thoughts?
I think it has to eventually, because of what we're talking about. You're going to get all these inconsistent rulings from different circuits around the country. And it's like the library case versus the Ripple case. One's in the First Circuit, one's in the Second Circuit. So the judge in library he's got to follow appellate cases above him in the First Circuit that's different than Judge Torres in the Ripple case. And so because of the inconsistencies between the different circuits, you're going to get different decisions. And so there's going to have to be, and I think the United States and Congress needs to look at the United Kingdom and what they did through their Financial Conduct Authority, Paul, where they said, look, what we're going to do, and they're still working on it, but they identified 3 types of tokens. A security token, which let's call it the Howey token, if you will, that meets the Howey test, and therefore it must be registered at the SEC. And then there's a utility token and an exchange token, and then there's a hybrid type token, right? And so in the UK, they ruled XRP as a hybrid token, acting in between a utility token and exchange token. And so there is going to have to be comprehensive legislation that lays it out, and how detailed it gets on what decentralization is sufficient versus not sufficient. Unfortunately, the SEC should have followed Hester Peirce's safe harbor provision that basically said, let's come together and get some guidance that says each promoter has 3 to 5 years and lay out some markers, right? Let's call them decentralization markers that, marker 1, marker 2, marker 3. And, by year 3 or 4, you have to meet all 3 of those decentralized markers. You'll be determined a commodity. If you fail, you'll be determined a security. That's what's so desperately needed. And imagine, Paul, where we'd be today if in 2018 we'd have got that kind of guidance, absolutely. And so unfortunately, we're waiting on Congress to do its job.
Do you feel like the United States is behind the 8 ball right now and are going to be forced to do something like this before the next term? When I say term, meaning president's term, or do you think this is going to be a longer play for lawmakers?
Well, let's look at what you just brought up. And you talked about Asia leading right now. Let's go back to 2018. In 2018, China outlawed crypto, right? They banned it. And here in the United States, the SEC said, okay, Bitcoin's not a security, Ethereum's not a security. And they put some guidance on. So if you go back to 2018, it looked like the United States was going to lead and Asia wasn't. We fast forward to today, and you have Hong Kong now coming out and being blessed by the Chinese government where they want to be the leader. And they're now going to allow trading of their citizens and residents in China to trade crypto. And so I unfortunately do believe that the United States is not going to be the leader because I don't believe, and I hate to say that, I served in the Marine Corps for 8 years. It hurts my soul to talk like this, but it's the truth. And, Congress, when can we expect them to do their job? I've said it's not going to happen before 2025. You're going to have to get another presidential election. You brought up president. That's going to be, in November of 2024, and then there'll be a new Congress that starts in January of 2025. So what can we hope for the second quarter of 2025 before the U.S. does something? As you just mentioned, Paul, this technology is rapid. And, how it looks today versus 2025 is going to
It's
be
going to be
not so similar.
insane. And they've done something very unique. They've attached these license contracts. I don't know if you've had a chance to see what they're doing, but essentially it's a music NFT. Rihanna, they go out to the producer or the actual arts owner, and they get the rights to it. Then I don't know if this would be considered fractionalized, but the point is they'll give the owner of that NFT a contract that sets outside the traditional contract. It's built into the NFT contract, and they get aspects of royalties from that music. With that kind of scenario, I know maybe you haven't had a chance to look at it, but what are your thoughts on that as to whether or not NFT holders could get royalties and whether or not those royalty contracts are actually legal?
Well, this is great and cutting edge stuff, and it's where the securities laws and technology, the rubber's meeting the road. But I think what you just described, I haven't looked at that specific project. However, Paul, you and I, you especially have discussed on your channel the tokenization of the world, right?
Right.
And how everything's getting tokenized. And so I think that if LeBron James was coming out today, a phenom like him, you would even see his entire contract tokenized, and individual fans could get a piece of his contract and royalties. And whether it's, the Empire State Building or Trump Tower or any of these, residences or commercial real estate where you become a rental shareholder, if you will, participating in the rents of commercial real estate. And so I'm someone who believes that the tokenization that you're talking about and ownership and royalties or rents and all of those things, we're just starting to scratch the surface, and I think it's going to explode as we move forward.
Well, it's
whether or not, and that's why I said that there's going to be litigation along the way, right? There'll be some attorney who comes along and says that what you just described with Rihanna, that's a security. They'll say that the person's relying on the efforts and talents of Rihanna, to gain profit. And so
right.
It'll be interesting. And so we're just desperately going to be in this sort of limbo stage until we can get Congress to lay down the rules.
This was about Grayscale. Let me zoom in on that for a little bit. The Grayscale will win, and this would be the ETF, the spot ETF. So you feel pretty confident that this could actually come to light?
I do. I'll be a bit surprised. I can't say shocked, but I'll be surprised if Grayscale loses. I was someone who, when they denied Anthony Scaramucci's, I tweeted him and said, you should do what Grayscale is doing. And Grayscale eventually did it. And so Professor Joe Grunfest, who teaches at Stanford Law, he's helped with ETH, he's helped with XRP. He's probably the most revered SEC commissioner in modern history. He's come out and said that it's a clear-cut case. It is very arbitrary and capricious, and that's the law. Is the SEC's denial arbitrary and capricious, or is it well-reasoned with facts in the law? And when you think about it, how do you justify a short ETF for Bitcoin? And how do you justify a derivatives and futures for Bitcoin for the last few years, but keep denying a spot ETF? So I predict a win. I know a lot of people are going against me, but I predict a win for Grayscale.
Sure. Why do you think that the SEC is being this way? Why so contentious? Is it just because they're trying to get this early land grab from a legal position, or do you think there's something else afoot here?
I think that you have, you could go back on, and I have it on my Crypto Law channel. You have Gary Gensler at MIT, Paul, where he's talked about the monopolistic nature of the banking system and how any disruptive technology has to meet the fight by the incumbents. And so, yes, part of it is this land grab, right? The SEC wants this nascent technology and they want to take jurisdiction. So, they're basically filing all these enforcement actions. But I honestly believe that Gary Gensler is an agent for the incumbent system. And I believe he's protecting the incumbents.
Yeah.
We use his own words against him. And I went on Charles Payne's show on Fox Business, and I said, listen, what's happening here is that at some point they're trying to crush this market, and then these legacy incumbent players will come in, they'll get a bigger share, and then all of a sudden when
It'll
BlackRock
loosen
and
up.
Fidelity, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, they got a much bigger grasp of it, then all of a sudden they'll loosen the reins, and then they'll come together and there'll be some kind of guidance. I believe in my heart that that's what's happening.